She was a virgin and only 20 years old, and he had no idea. The millionaire touched her, thinking it would be something temporary. Days later, she was crying alone with a positive test in her hand. But what he did when he found out, no one was prepared. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. We continue. The triplex penthouse was the perfect setting for yet another ostentatious party, thrown by Caio Muller, heir to the Muller Incorporações real estate empire. At 32, Caio personified the Brazilian dream of success. Handsome, rich, and influential. His Instagram account had millions of followers who followed every detail of his seemingly perfect life, from his imported sports cars to his helicopter rides to escape the chaotic traffic in the capital of São Paulo. That Saturday night, the elite of São Paulo gathered to celebrate Caio's birthday. An international DJ, unlimited French champagne, and decorations that cost the equivalent of many Brazilians' annual salaries. The panoramic view of the city, with its lights stretching to the horizon, served as a backdrop for the artificial smiles and superficial conversations. "Congratulations on the success of the new venture in Morumbi, Caio. I heard that you sold all the apartments in record time," commented one of his father's partners, raising his glass in a toast. Caio smiled mechanically, as he had learned to do since he was a child. "Thank you. Muller never disappoints, does it?" As the words left his mouth, a familiar feeling of emptiness settled in his chest. It was as if he were playing a role in an endless play, a spectacle he could not escape. In everyone's eyes, he was the man who had everything. Inside himself, he felt like he possessed nothing of true value. He quietly stepped away from the circle of guests and walked out onto the balcony. The night breeze brought a momentary relief. Below, the city, pulsed with chaotic, vibrant energy, thousands of lives happening simultaneously, each with its own story. How many of these people were truly happy? How many lived trapped in gilded cages like his, needing air too? The female voice pulled him out of his thoughts. He turned around and found a woman who didn't fit the usual pattern of his parties. She wore a simple dress, without the excess of glitter and strategic necklines of the socialites who frequented his circle. Her curly hair was loose, framing a face that didn't need elaborate makeup to attract attention. "Parties can get stuffy." "Sometimes," he replied, intrigued by the stranger's presence. "Especially when they're full of people trying to impress each other," she commented with a sincere smile. The bluntness of the remark took him by surprise. He wasn't used to people saying what they really thought. "I'm Caio," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I know who you are," she laughed. "It would be hard not to, considering we're at your party. I'm Aline Santana." "And what are you doing at my party, Aline Santana? I don't remember seeing you before." "I came with my friend Daniela, who works at your foundation. In fact, I'm an art teacher in Capão Redondo, a very different world from this one." She gestured to the luxurious surroundings. Caio felt genuine curiosity for the first time in a long time. An art teacher from the outskirts at his birthday party was like finding a precious stone amidst expensive, flashy trinkets. "And what do you think of this world?" he asked, genuinely interested in the answer. "Impressive, sure, but a little—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Empty?" he added. Their eyes met, and something inexplicable happened. It was as if, for a brief moment, the social masks had fallen and two real people saw each other for the first time. "I didn't mean to sound ungrateful or critical," she was quick to explain. "It's a privilege to be here, but I'd rather be somewhere else," he concluded, smiling genuinely for the first time that night. "Me too." The conversation flowed naturally after that. Aline talked about her work with vulnerable children, about how art could transform lives and open horizons. Caio listened, fascinated, as if he had discovered a parallel universe that existed just a few kilometers from his penthouse, but that seemed infinitely distant from his reality. "And you?" she asked finally. "What do you do besides parties and real estate?" The simple question left him with no immediate answer. What did he really do? He followed in his father's footsteps, attended meetings, closed deals, posed for pictures, kept up appearances. He lived a life he had never chosen. "I'm trying to figure it out," he replied with surprising honesty even to himself. The hours passed like minutes. The party around them continued, but for Caio and Aline, it was as if they were in a bubble, separated from reality. When most of the guests had already left, they were still talking, now sitting in a quieter corner of the wide terrace. "I think I need to go," Aline said, looking at her watch. "It's already after 3 in the morning, and I have an appointment early tomorrow morning." "Let me call my driver to take you," Caio offered. "No need, my friend Daniela must be waiting for me." But Daniela had left hours earlier, convinced that Aline was having too much fun to be interrupted. "It looks like you're without a ride," Caio said. "I insist on taking you." In the panoramic elevator that descended the 30 floors of the building, the silence between them was charged with expectation. The physical proximity intensified the connection they had established through words. When their hands accidentally touched, it was like an electric current running through their bodies. In the luxury car that snaked through the empty streets of São Paulo, the conversation resumed, but with a different intensity. Each word seemed to have multiple meanings. Each look communicated more than they could express verbally. "It's here," Aline said when they arrived at a small building in the Pinheiros neighborhood. Caio went down to accompany her to the door. Under the dim light of the building's entrance, they stood face to face, hesitant like teenagers after a first date. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Aline Santana," he said, holding her hands in his. "The pleasure was mine, Caio Muller," she replied with a smile that lit up the night. Neither of them planned what happened next. The kiss came naturally, as if it were the only possible conclusion to that night. A kiss that started shy and quickly turned into something more intense, more urgent, full of desire and a strange feeling of recognition, as if their lips had known each other from another life. "Do you want to come in?" Aline asked in a whisper, when they finally separated. That night, between simple cotton sheets, so different from the Egyptian silk sheets he was used to, Caio experienced an intimacy that went beyond the physical. Every touch, every sigh seemed to fill a little of the emptiness he carried inside him. For the first time in years, he felt truly present, truly alive. 3 weeks had passed since the night Aline and Caio had shared. The next morning, he had left before dawn, leaving only a note with his phone number and a vague promise that they would see each other again. Aline kept the paper, but decided not to make contact. That night had been magical, perfect in its spontaneity and intensity, and perhaps it should remain that way, a unique moment suspended in time, without the complications of the real world. Her small apartment. Aline tried to concentrate on her student's work spread out on the table, but her mind kept returning to that night. It had been her first time, something she had never shared with Caio. At 27 years old, many would consider this unusual, even anachronistic, but Aline had always been different, prioritizing her studies, her career, and above all, hoping to find someone with whom to share not only her body, but her soul. Had Caio been that someone, or was it just the dazzlement caused by a handsome and rich man who for one night seemed to truly see her? A sudden feeling of uneasiness interrupted his thoughts. He ran to the bathroom and, for the 3rd time that week, he vomited violently. When the dizziness passed, he stared at his reflection in the mirror. Dark circles darkened his face, and an unusual paleness replaced the usual dark tone of his skin. "Must be stress," she muttered to herself, trying to ignore the possibility that was beginning to form in her mind. The next day, after yet another bout of morning sickness, Aline could no longer deny the obvious. With trembling hands, she bought a pregnancy test at the pharmacy near the school where she worked. The minutes she waited for the results seemed like an eternity. When the 2 pink lines appeared, clear and unmistakable, her world fell apart. Pregnant. At 27 years old, single with a teacher's salary that barely covered her own expenses, and the child's father was a billionaire who had probably already forgotten her name. The tears came, abundant and desperate. They were not tears of rejection at the idea of being a mother. Aline had always dreamed of having children someday. They were tears of fear, of uncertainty, of feeling completely unprepared for the responsibility that now grew within her. What am I going to do?" he whispered, hugging his knees as he sat on the cold bathroom floor. The first person she thought of was her grandmother, Donna Teresa. Ever since her parents had moved to Portugal in search of better opportunities, leaving Aline behind to finish her studies, her grandmother had been her safe haven. A strong woman who had raised 5 children alone after being widowed at a young age, Donna Teresa embodied the wisdom and resilience that Aline so desperately needed at that moment. Over the weekend, she took a bus to Embu das Artes in the metropolitan region of São Paulo, where her grandmother lived in a simple but welcoming house surrounded by a lush garden that was her pride and joy. Upon seeing her granddaughter, Donna Teresa knew immediately that something serious was happening. "What happened, my daughter? It looks like you saw a ghost," said the 78-year-old woman, leading Aline to the kitchen, where the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the room. Aline burst into tears again. Between sobs, she told him about the party, about Caio, about the night they spent together, and finally about the pregnancy. Donna Teresa listened to everything in silence, her wise eyes fixed on her granddaughter. When Aline finished, the old woman took her hands in hers, calloused from decades of hard work. "Life sometimes surprises us, my daughter. We rarely feel prepared for its greatest gifts. But Grandma, how am I going to raise a child alone? How am I going to support him? And the father, he doesn't even know." "He has a right to know," Donna Teresa said with conviction. "Not so he can take responsibility, but because it's the right thing to do. What he decides after that is up to him. You'll always have me, and that's more than most people have." Meanwhile, miles away in the financial center of São Paulo, Caio was attending a crucial meeting with foreign investors. Muller Incorporações' new venture in Itaim Bibi promised to be the most profitable yet. His father, Ricardo Muller, watched approvingly as his son presented projections and charts with the confidence and charisma that were the family's trademark. But behind the professional facade, Caio's mind was wandering. Ever since the night with Aline, something had changed inside him. The meetings that had once bored him now seemed completely devoid of meaning. The business dinners, the exclusive parties, the luxury cars, everything suddenly seemed empty, like an elaborate stage set that had lost its magic. He picked up his phone several times to call her, but he always backed out at the last minute. What would he say? That he couldn't stop thinking about her? That the connection they felt was real or just the product of a night of shared vulnerability? "Caius! Caius!" His father's voice brought him back to reality. The investors were staring at him, waiting for an answer to a question they hadn't heard. "Excuse me, gentlemen. Could you repeat the question?" After the meeting, Ricardo called his son to his office. "What's going on with you? First that story about wanting to audit the working conditions on our construction sites, now this distracted behavior during a crucial meeting. I no longer recognize the son I raised." Caio felt a spark of anger. "Maybe that's the problem, Dad. Maybe you raised me to be an extension of you, not a person with ideas and feelings of my own." Ricardo stepped back, surprised by the answer. In all his 32 years, Caius had never challenged his authority like this. "This company will be yours one day, Caio. Everything I've built, everything I've fought for. Don't throw it away because of some youthful idealism." "I'm 32, Dad. I've long since passed the stage of youthful idealism. What I'm questioning now is whether I really want to be the next Ricardo Muller." He left his father's office without waiting for a response, his mind in turmoil with contradictory thoughts. In the elevator, he made an impulsive decision. He typed Aline's address into the transportation app, and minutes later, he was on his way to Pinheiros. The building looked even more modest in the daylight. Caius hesitated for a moment before ringing the intercom. What if she didn't want to see him? What if the night that had been transformative for him had been nothing more than an unimportant interlude for her? He took a deep breath and pressed the button. Nothing. He tried again. Silence. A lady passing by with shopping bags looked at him curiously. "If you're looking for the girl from 302, she left early today with a suitcase." It looked like she was going to travel. Disappointed, Kaio thanked her for the information and returned to the car. He thought about calling her but realized that, despite having left his number, he had never asked for hers. A mistake that now seemed unforgivable. Back at his apartment, he found Gustavo, his best friend since college, waiting for him for the dinner they had arranged. "You look terrible," Gustavo commented as they helped themselves to sushi and sake. "Problems with old Ricardo?" Kaio hesitated. Gustavo was his most trusted person, but until then, he had never shared anything so personal. "I met someone," he finally admitted. The friend smiled, amused. "Kaio Muller in love? That's new. Who's the lucky lady? An international model? An actress? An heiress to a rival empire?" "An art teacher from Capão Redondo." The sushi that Gustavo was bringing to his mouth stopped halfway. "You're kidding. I've never been so serious." For the next hour, Kaio talked about Aline, about the night they spent together, about how he couldn't get the connection they had established out of his head. "And why didn't you look for her before?" Just Gustavo, fear maybe. Fear of finding out that it was just one night, that it didn't mean to her what it meant to me, or fear that it might have meant exactly the same thing and that it might force you to rethink your entire life. His friend's words hit Kaio like a punch. That was exactly it. Aline represented a possibility for a different, authentic, meaningful life. And this possibility terrified him as much as it attracted him. "I must find her," he decided, suddenly resolute. "What? You don't even have her phone number." "She mentioned that she works at an arts NGO in Capão Redondo. It shouldn't be hard to find." That same night, while Kaio was planning how to find Aline, she was returning from the weekend with her grandmother, strengthened by Donna Teresa's wisdom and unconditional love. She had made a decision. She would tell Kaio about the pregnancy, not to demand anything from him, not to force a relationship, but because, as her grandmother had said, it was the right thing to do. With renewed determination, she took the note, with Kaio's number, and typed a simple message. "We need to talk, it's important, Aline." Aline's message arrived just as Kaio was getting out of the shower. The ringing of his cell phone cut through the silence of the spacious apartment, and his heart raced when he saw her name on the screen. The coincidence seemed almost providential. He was thinking about how to find her, and she was contacting him at the same time. He replied immediately, "I need to see you too. When can we meet?" The answer took only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. "Tomorrow at 7 p.m. at Praça Victor Chivita in Pinheiros." A public, neutral place. Kaio understood the choice. "I'll be there." That night, sleep was elusive. His mind was buzzing with possibilities. What had Aline meant? Had she felt the same connection he did? Or was it just a meeting to make it clear that that night had meant nothing more than a moment of weakness? The next morning, over coffee, his father watched him with an analytical eye. "I heard you've been asking about the working conditions on our construction sites," Ricardo commented, without looking up from his financial newspaper. "Yes, I think we should make sure all our workers have adequate safety equipment and fair pay." Ricardo sighed, placing the newspaper on the table. "Since when do you worry about this, Kaio? We've always run this company the same way, and it's brought us here, one of the largest real estate groups in Brazil. Maybe it's time for a change, Dad, to do things differently." "It's because of that teacher, isn't it?" Kaio froze. How did his father know about Aline? "I have my resources, son. When the Muller heir starts acting strangely, it's my duty to find out why." Indignation took hold of Kaio. "Did you order me to follow?" "I just asked them to check on your well-being. You didn't seem like yourself." "And who would I be, Dad?" "The robot you programmed to carry on your legacy. The puppet who smiles in the pictures in business magazines." Ricardo shook his head, a mixture of disappointment and concern on his face. "This girl is putting dangerous ideas in your head." "No, Dad. She just helped me see what was already there, hidden beneath years of conditioning. Now if you'll—" "Excuse me, I have a company to help run. My way." He left the dining room, leaving his father speechless, something that had never happened before. At the same time, across town, Aline was facing her own battle. Her morning sickness had gotten worse, and she could barely teach her classes without having to run to the bathroom several times. "You need to see a doctor, Aline," insisted Daniela, her friend and colleague at the NGO. "This doesn't look like a common virus." Aline nodded, not mentioning that she already knew exactly what was happening to her body. She wasn't ready to share the news yet, not before talking to Caio. "I'll make an appointment this week," she promised, just to calm her friend down. During the afternoon, while guiding a group of teenagers in a mural project, Aline couldn't shake her thoughts about her encounter with Caio. How would he react to the news? Would he be the type to take responsibility, or would he simply offer money to solve the problem? And what did she really want from him? "Teacher, is everything okay?" The voice of Lucas, one of her most talented students, brought her back to reality. The 15-year-old boy was watching her with genuine concern. "Yes, Lucas, I'm just a little tired today." "You look sad," the teenager insisted. "When my mother is sad, she paints. She says that colors drive away sadness." Aline smiled, touched by the young man's sensitivity. "Your mother is a wise woman, Lucas. Colors really do have that power." Inspired by this indirect advice, Aline spent the rest of the afternoon painting alongside her students, allowing the vibrant colors of the mural in progress to soothe her tumultuous mind. Art had always been her refuge, her way of processing complex emotions. Now more than ever, she needed this outlet. At 6:45 p.m., after a quick stop at home to change her clothes, Aline arrived at Victor Civita Square. The space, an old garbage incinerator transformed into a green area, perfectly symbolized the possibility of transformation, of giving new life to what seemed lost. She sat on one of the benches, watching the movement of people who took advantage of the late afternoon to exercise or simply enjoy the rare green space in the concrete of the metropolis. At 7 p.m. sharp, she spotted Caio walking toward her. Even though he was dressed more casually than usual, jeans and a simple shirt, he still exuded an aura of privilege that contrasted with the surroundings. A few people recognized him, whispering and pointing discreetly. "Hi," he said, sitting down next to her, keeping a respectful distance. "Hi," Aline replied, suddenly speechless, despite having mentally rehearsed this moment dozens of times. They were silent for a few moments, watching a group of children playing in the distance. "You disappeared," Caius said finally. "You too," she retorted. "You left before I woke up. I thought it would be easier this way, less complicated." "And was it?" Caio turned to face her, his eyes reflecting a vulnerability that Aline hadn't noticed before. "No, it wasn't easy at all. I can't stop thinking about you, Aline. That night, our conversation, how I felt real for the first time in years." The raw honesty of the statement caught her off guard. She had prepared herself for coldness, for disinterest, even for rejection, not for this emotional openness. "Caius, Before you say anything," he interrupted her gently, "I want you to know that I understand if it was just a one-night stand for you. I have no expectations. I just needed to see you again, to tell you in person how much it meant to me." Aline took a deep breath. It was now or never. "I am pregnant." The words came out abruptly, without any introduction or preparation. He saw Caius's eyes widen, his expression freezing in absolute shock. "Pregnant," he repeated, as if he needed to hear the word again to understand its meaning. "Yes. And before you ask, yes, he is yours. In fact, you were the first and only man I've ever been with." This additional revelation seemed to further heighten the impact of the news. Caius opened and closed his mouth several times, clearly struggling to find words. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything now," Aline replied, maintaining her composure despite her racing heart. "I'm not telling you to demand anything. I just thought you had a right to know." "How long?" "About 3 weeks. I found out a few days ago." "And what are your plans?" The question was delicate, loaded with implicit meanings. "I'm going to have the baby," Aline declared firmly. "As for the rest, I'm still processing it. My grandmother knows and is supporting me. For now, that's all I know for sure." Caio nodded slowly, his gaze lost on the horizon. The sun was beginning to set, dyeing the sky of São Paulo with shades, of orange and red rarely visible through the pollution. "A son," he muttered almost to himself. It wasn't in my plans, not now." "Not even mine," Aline agreed, "but it happened." Another silence fell between them, this one heavier, laden with the weight of the responsibility they now shared. "I need some time," Caius said finally. "To process, to think. This changes everything." Aline felt a tightness in her chest. She didn't know exactly what she expected from this conversation, but the reality of the situation was beginning to set in. They were connected now by a life that was growing inside her, regardless of their feelings for each other. "I understand. Take all the time you need." She stood up, ready to leave, but Caio gently grabbed her wrist. "Wait. I'm not saying I want to walk away or deny my responsibility. I just need to realign my thoughts. Can I call you tomorrow?" The vulnerability in her voice was palpable, and Aline felt her own emotional armor begin to crack. "Sure," he replied, exchanging phone numbers officially this time. As they walked, in opposite directions through the square, which was beginning to empty as night fell, they both carried a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Aline, a mixture of relief at having finally shared her secret and apprehension about the uncertain future. Caio, a whirlwind of shock, fear, and surprisingly, a strange sense of purpose that he had never experienced before. In his luxury apartment, Caio spent the night awake, reviewing every moment of his life, every choice that had brought him to this point. A son, a responsibility that could not be delegated to assistants or solved with money, a life that would depend on him for much more than material resources. And in her modest apartment in Pinheiros, Aline also gazed at the ceiling, one hand instinctively resting on her still flat belly. She didn't regret telling the truth, but she feared what would come next. Could she really raise a child alone? And if Caio decided to join in, what would it be like to share fatherhood with someone from a world so different from her own? Both, separated by kilometers and social chasms, shared the same insomnia and the same certainty that nothing in their lives would be the same again. The morning after the meeting in the square, Caio woke up to the insistent ringing of his cell phone. It was his father. "Where are you?" "The meeting with Chinese investors starts in 20 minutes. Caio looked at his watch and cursed softly. He had completely forgotten about the appointment. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, he promised, jumping out of bed. As he hurriedly dressed, his mind was still filled with the revelations of the night before. He was going to be a father. The word echoed in his consciousness like a mantra, at once terrifying and strangely exhilarating. He had never seriously considered fatherhood. In his world, children were often seen as heirs, continuations of a legacy, rarely as human beings, with emotional needs of their own. His own relationship with Ricardo had always been more professional than paternal. From an early age, he had been groomed to take over the family real estate empire, with little room to explore his own interests or desires. Would he be able to offer his son something different? Or would he repeat the same pattern, perpetuating a cycle of stifling expectations and affection, conditional on performance? He arrived at the office just 2 minutes late. His father was waiting for him in the meeting room, accompanied by a group of Chinese businessmen and their interpreters. The conversation revolved around a possible investment in the new Alphaville project, a luxury condominium that would be the most exclusive ever built by Muller Incorporações. "Here he is, gentlemen, the future of our company," Ricardo introduced, with a proud smile that didn't reach his eyes. For the next 2 hours, Caio conducted himself like the competent executive everyone expected him to be. He presented numbers, projections, answered questions, negotiated terms. But his mind was miles away, in a small apartment in Pinheiros, with an art teacher who was carrying his son. When the meeting finally ended, with promises of future deals and enthusiastic handshakes, Ricardo placed his hand on his son's shoulder, leading him back to his private office. "Excellent work, Caio. Despite your recent behavior, you still know how to close a deal." "Thank you, Dad." "Now what's really going on? And don't beat around the bush. I've known you since you were born." The irony of the phrase was not lost on Caio. His father had known him since birth, but had never really known him, had never made the effort to understand his desires, his fears, his dreams. Something in that moment, perhaps the recent news of his fatherhood, perhaps the accumulation of years of frustration, gave Caio the courage he had never had. "I'm going to be a father," he announced carefully, observing the reaction of the man in front of him. Ricardo visibly paled. What? What do you mean? Who's the mother?" "Aline, the art teacher." The initial shock quickly gave way to the controlled fury that was Ricardo Muller's trademark. "Is this some kind of joke? You got a stranger pregnant? A public school teacher?" "It wasn't planned, obviously, but it happened, and now I have to deal with it." "Deal with it? Caio, you're the heir to Muller. You can't just deal with an unwanted pregnancy as if it were any business problem. There's the family's reputation to consider, the future of the company." "He's my son, Dad, not a PR problem." Ricardo ran his hand through his gray hair, visibly trying to regain his composure. Okay, let's work this out discreetly. We can offer a generous settlement, make sure she and the child are comfortable, but keep enough distance to—" "No," Caio interrupted, his voice surprisingly firm. "I'm not going to buy my child's mother's silence or negotiate controlled visitation like a business contract. I'm going to be a part of this child's life, fully." Ricardo looked at his son as if he were seeing him for the first time. "You're not thinking clearly. This woman, she obviously saw an opportunity. A Muller is a lottery prize for someone of her class." The insinuation made Caio's blood boil. "You don't know Aline. She didn't even want to tell me about the pregnancy, precisely to avoid this kind of judgment. It was out of integrity that she sought me out, not out of interest. Son, you've always been too idealistic. The world doesn't work that way." "Maybe that's why the world is so broken, Dad, because people like us, who have the power to make a difference, choose cynicism over humanity." He left the office before the argument escalated any further, leaving his father stunned. In the elevator, he took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions. He needed to see Aline again, talk calmly, start planning the future. They now shared. Meanwhile, at a public medical clinic in the western part of São Paulo, Aline waited anxiously to be called. She had been referred to an emergency appointment by a colleague at the NGO. The waiting room was crowded, mostly with pregnant women in various stages of pregnancy. Some, very young, seemed as scared as she was. Others, older and more experienced, displayed the serenity of those who already knew the ropes. "Aline Santana?" the nurse called. In the small consultation room, the doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, greeted her with a tired but sincere smile. "So, first baby?" he asked, as he examined the form filled out by Aline. "Yes. And unplanned." "The two." Doctor nodded without judgment. "Many are not. That doesn't mean they can't be loved and welcomed. How are you feeling?" "Physically, constant nausea, extreme fatigue, emotionally terrified." The raw honesty made the doctor smile. "It's a normal response. Motherhood is scary even when it's planned, even more so when it takes us by surprise." After a basic physical exam and a series of questions about her medical history, the doctor confirmed what the home test had already indicated. "You are approximately 4 weeks pregnant. We will need to do some blood tests, check your hormone levels, vitamins, presence of antibodies. I will also refer you for an ultrasound, but that will not be until a few weeks later, when we will be able to see more details." Aline nodded, absorbing the information as best she could, as the doctor continued explaining about prenatal care, proper nutrition, necessary supplements. It was a lot to process at once. "What about the child's father? Is he participating?" asked the doctor, noticing the blank space on the form where this information should have been. "It's complicated. He just found out." "I understand. Well, regardless of his involvement, it's important that you have a support network. Pregnancy is not easy, and the first few months of motherhood are even more challenging. I have my grandmother," Aline replied, thinking of Donna Teresa, "and some close friends." "Great. That's a good start." As she left the clinic, with a list of tests to do and a prescription for folic acid and iron supplements, Aline felt her cell phone vibrate. It was a message from Caio. "Can we meet tonight? I'd like to talk more calmly." Aline answered affirmatively, suggesting a quiet cafe near her house. She was nervous, but also curiously relieved. At least Caio hadn't disappeared after the news, like so many stories she knew. That night, sitting at a discreet table in the back of an unassuming cafe, Caio and Aline faced the reality of their situation with a frankness that surprised them. "Both, I want to be part of our son's life," Caio said after a brief, uncomfortable silence. "Not just financially, I want to be there to be a real father." Aline studied him, trying to discern the sincerity behind the words. "Why? I mean, you barely know me. You're under no obligation to—" "It's not about obligation," he interrupted gently. "It's about choice, and I choose to be present. Maybe because I never had a truly present father, just a business mentor who shared my last name." The vulnerability of the confession touched Aline deeply. "I went to the doctor today," she said, changing the subject slightly. "The baby is doing fine, apparently. It's too early to know much, but it's real, it's happening." Caius nodded, trying to imagine the small life that now existed, part of him, part of her, an entirely new person. "How do you feel about this?" "Truly?" The question took Aline by surprise. No one had asked her that before. Everyone seemed to assume she must be either desperate or overjoyed, with no room for the real complexity of her emotions. Scared, excited, worried, grateful, all. At the same time, it's overwhelming. I can imagine, or rather I can't really. It must be different when it's your body. Recognizing her unique experience earned him points in her estimation. "Yes, it's different, but no less real to you, I imagine." Caio reached out his hand across the table, lightly touching hers. "Aline, I know we don't have a traditional relationship. We barely know each other. But I'd like to get to know you better, not just for the child, but for you, for the connection." I felt that night. Aline felt her heart race. It was dangerous to allow herself to feel. Something for Caio. Their worlds were so different. The chances of ending up hurt were huge. But there was something in his sincerity, in the way his eyes never left hers when he spoke, that made her want to take the risk. "We could try," he finally agreed. "One step at a time." The smile that lit up Caio's face was so genuine, so different from the calculated expression he used at social events, that Aline couldn't help but smile back. "One step at a time," he repeated, squeezing her hand gently. Over the next few weeks, they established a peculiar routine. Caio accompanied her to medical appointments, arriving discreetly and always asking beforehand if his presence would be welcome. Aline, in turn, allowed herself to get to know a little of his world, accepting invitations to simple dinners. He had quickly realized that very luxurious environments made her uncomfortable, and long walks in Ibirapuera Park, where they talked about everything, from their contrasting childhoods to their dreams for the future. With each meeting, the connection between them deepened, transcending the circumstances that had brought them together. Aline discovered in Caio a sensitivity that he had carefully kept hidden from the corporate world. Caio, in turn, found in Aline an authenticity and strength that inspired him to increasingly question the choices he had made up until then. It was during one of these meetings, sitting by the Ibirapuera lake, that Caio first mentioned the idea he had been silently cultivating. "I've been thinking about leaving my father's company." Aline stared at him, shocked. "Caio, it's your life's work, your family's legacy. A legacy I never chose, a job I never loved. I've been thinking about using my resources for something more meaningful, something that really makes a difference." "Like what?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe something to do with education or supporting single mothers. Meeting you, seeing your work at the NGO made me realize how many talented people never get a chance because they were born on the wrong side of town." Aline felt a surge of affection for him. She had feared that the class difference between them would be an insurmountable obstacle, but Caio seemed increasingly aware of the privileges he possessed and genuinely interested in using them for good. "Your father will be furious," he commented, imagining the reaction of the powerful Ricardo Mueller. "Probably," Caius agreed with a resigned smile. But for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm making my own decisions, not just following the script he wrote for me. At that moment, as the sun began to set over the park, casting golden reflections over the lake, Aline allowed herself to imagine a future where she, Caio, and the baby were a real family. Not a traditional family, perhaps, but one built on mutual respect, growing affection, and shared values. It was a dangerous dream, she knew. Too many barriers still stood between them. His family, their different worlds, social expectations. But for the first time since she discovered she was pregnant, Aline felt genuine hope blossom in her heart. The first ultrasound was a moment of transformation for both of them. In the small room of the public hospital, where Caio looked out of place in his expensive suit, despite his attempts to dress more casually, they saw for the first time the little being they had created together. It was no longer an abstract idea, a concept of pregnancy. It was a baby with a fast-beating heart visible on the black and white screen. That little pulsing dot is the heart, the doctor explained, moving the transducer over Aline's belly. Everything looks perfectly normal. The baby is approximately 12 weeks old and is developing exactly as expected. Aline couldn't hold back her tears. It was real. It was happening. A life was growing in her womb, half hers, half Caio's, but entirely unique. "Do you want to know the sex?" asked the doctor. They looked at each other, a moment of silent connection. "Not yet," Aline replied. "I'd rather it be a surprise." Caius nodded, squeezing her hand in support. There was something magical about not knowing, about imagining both a boy and a girl, about letting the baby reveal itself to them at the right time. As they left the hospital, walking side by side towards the parking lot, Caio looked thoughtful, almost solemn. "Is everything okay?" Aline asked, worried about her silence. "Yeah, just impacted, I guess. Seeing the heart beating, knowing that it's real, that it depends on us." Aline understood perfectly. It was scary and wonderful at the same time. "Aline," he continued, stopping suddenly and turning to face her, "I know we promised to take it slow, one step at a time, but after today, I need to ask you something." Her heart raced. Was this an official proposal, or something more serious? Over the past few weeks, their relationship had deepened in unexpected ways. Caio had become a constant presence in her life, calling daily, showing up with little surprises. A book he'd mentioned wanting to read, organic fruit for her morning smoothies, even art supplies for her students at the non-profit. "I'd like you to meet my family officially. Have you signed up yet? Do it now and tell us which city you're following us from." The proposal caught her off guard. Meeting the Muller family was a much bigger step than she had anticipated. "Your family? You mean your parents?" "Yes. It's time for them to know about the baby, about us. I don't want to hide this anymore like it's a shameful secret." Aline felt a mixture of gratitude for his attitude and apprehension about what was to come. How would she be received by the powerful Muller family? How would the news of an illegitimate grandson, the result of a night with a teacher from the outskirts, be received? "Are you sure? Your father doesn't seem like the kind of man who would take this news well." "It's not about him," Caio said, with a conviction that surprised them both. "It's about our family, the family we're building. Our family." The words rang in Aline's heart like a bell. They were really building a family, weren't they? Not in the conventional way, not following the traditional order of dating, engagement, marriage, and then children, but a family nonetheless. "Okay," he agreed, feeling an unexpected courage rise within him. "When?" "How about Sunday? Lunch at my parents' house." And so the following Sunday, Aline found herself entering the Muller mansion in Jardim Europa, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in São Paulo. The house was exactly as she had imagined, imposing, elegant, with a perfectly manicured garden and a team of discreet and efficient staff. She dressed simply but carefully, a navy blue dress that hid her still barely visible belly, her hair tied back in a low bun, minimal makeup. She had decided to be authentically herself. Trying to pass herself off as something she wasn't would only make things more difficult. Caius stood beside her, a comforting presence, his hand occasionally touching the small of her back in a gesture of silent support. There was something different about him today, a determination, a firmness that he hadn't shown before. In the spacious living room, with designer furniture and original works of art on the walls, Ricardo and Elisa Müller were waiting for them. Ricardo, tall and imposing like his son, but with a calculating look that Caio did not have. Elisa, elegant and cold, observing Aline with analytical eyes, as if she were evaluating a piece at an auction. "Mom, Dad, this is Aline Santana," Caio introduced, his voice firm. "The woman I mentioned." Ricardo extended his hand in a formal greeting while Elisa offered a polite but distant smile. "Miss Santana, welcome to our home," Ricardo said, each word carefully measured. "Caio told us that you are a teacher." "Yes, visual arts. I work with children and teenagers at an NGO in Capão Redondo." "Admirable," Elisa commented, in a tone that suggested anything but admiration. "It must be gratifying." The conversation continued like this for a few minutes. Polite but judgmental questions, polite but authentic answers from Aline, and Caio's growing tension, which seemed ready to explode. Finally, when they sat down for lunch in the elegant dining room, Caius cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Mom, Dad, I invited Aline today because I have something important to share with you." Ricardo put down his cutlery, his gaze fixed on his son. "Aline is pregnant. We're going to have a baby together." The silence that followed was deafening. Elisa paled visibly, while Ricardo maintained his impassive expression, only a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth indicating his disturbance. "I see," the patriarch finally said. "And what are your plans?" "We will raise this child together," Caius replied promptly. "The exact details we are discovering little by little." "Together," Ricardo repeated. "You mean married?" Aline felt her stomach sink. It was a loaded question, and Caio's answer would potentially define the course of lunch and their relationship. "Not necessarily," Caio replied carefully. "We're building our relationship one day at a time. The important thing is that we're both committed to our son's well-being." "Committed," Elisa echoed, speaking for the first time since the announcement. "How convenient." The condescending tone did not go unnoticed by Aline. "Mrs. Müller," she said, gathering her courage, "I understand your concern. We did not plan this pregnancy, and it is certainly not an ideal situation. But your son has been extraordinary throughout this entire process. Respectful, present, thoughtful. You have raised a man of character, and it is evident in the way he is handling this unexpected responsibility." The sincere compliment seemed to take Elisa by surprise. Her previously cold gaze softened slightly. Ricardo, on the other hand, maintained his calculating stance. "Caio, can we talk in private for a moment?" "Anything you need to tell me, you can say in front of Aline," Caio replied firmly. "Son, there are family matters, matters of heritage that we need to discuss." "Oh, I see," Caio laughed humorlessly. "You want to warn me about scams, about paternity tests, about prenuptial agreements. It's not necessary, Dad. I trust Aline, and I trust my ability to make my own decisions." Ricardo's expression hardened. "You're being naive, Caius. You wouldn't be the first heir to be manipulated by a—" "For a what, father?" Caius interrupted, his voice dangerously calm. "For a woman who works honestly, who dedicates her life to helping underprivileged children, who had the integrity to tell me about the pregnancy even though she knew she could handle everything on her own. Is that what you think is manipulative?" Aline placed a hand on Caio's arm, trying to calm him down. "It's okay," he murmured. "I understand your parents' concerns." "No, it's not okay," Caio insisted. "I'm tired of this, tired of living in a world where a person's worth is measured by their bank balance or their last name. It's this world that's made me feel empty for so long. That's made me question if I'd ever find anything real." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping with a loud noise on the marble floor. "And while we're having this conversation, there's one more thing you need to know. I'm leaving the company." The statement fell like a bomb in the dining room. Ricardo stood up too, his face now red with fury. "What? Did you lose your mind? Because of her? He pointed at Aline. No, Dad. Because of me. Because I finally found the courage to follow my own path. I'm going to use my share of the estate to found an organization that supports single mothers and families in vulnerable situations, something that will really make a difference in people's lives. Elisa let out an exclamation of surprise, while Ricardo looked like he was about to have an attack. You're throwing away my life's work, the legacy I built for you. No, Dad. I'm building my own legacy, one that my son can look up to one day. Taking Aline by the hand, Caio led her out of the dining room, leaving his stunned parents behind. In the car, he finally let out the breath he hadn't even realized he was holding. I'm sorry about that, he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I knew it would be hard, but I don't know what I expected, really. Aline watched him with a mixture of admiration and concern. Are you sure about leaving the company? It's a huge decision, Caio. I've never been so sure of anything in my life, he replied, looking her in the eyes. Seeing you, your work, the difference you make in those children's lives, it made me realize how pointless my own life was. I want to build something that matters, Aline, something that will make our son proud. Aline felt tears in her eyes, touched by the sincerity of his words. You already make me proud, he admitted softly. At that moment, in the car parked in front of the Muller mansion, Caio leaned over and kissed her. Her different kiss from the first one they had shared months ago. It was not driven by impulse or momentary desire, but by something deeper, more meaningful. A kiss that spoke of commitment, of conscious choices, of a future they were willing to build together, regardless of the obstacles. When they separated, Caio kept his face close to hers. I know we promised to take it slow, but I need you to know, I'm in love with you, Aline Santana, not just with the mother of my child, but with you, your strength, your integrity, your heart. You've shown me a world I barely knew, and I'm a better person because of it. The words, as unexpected as they were sincere, touched Aline deeply. She had resisted her own feelings, afraid of being hurt, afraid of the difference between their worlds. But in that moment, she realized that she had fallen in love with him too. Not with the Muller heir, but with the man who strove to be better, who questioned his privileges, who faced his own fears for something he believed in. I'm in love. With you too, she confessed, feeling like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders with the admission. And that terrifies me. Caio smiled, understanding perfectly. We can be scared together, he suggested, taking her hand. One step at a time, remember? And so, as they left behind the Muller mansion and everything it represented, Aline allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, modern fairy tales didn't have to follow the traditional script. Maybe they could write their own story, one built not on social conventions or external expectations, but on authentic choices and true love, the kind of love that transforms, that heals, that builds. The following months brought drastic changes for Caio and Aline. Her belly grew, making the pregnancy something impossible to ignore. At first, there were curious looks and whispers among her students at the NGO, until Aline decided to address the issue directly, turning her experience into a lesson about life and responsibility for the teenagers she worked with. Yes, I'm pregnant, she announced during an afternoon of art activities. And no, I'm not married. Life sometimes takes unexpected turns, and what matters is how we respond to those challenges. To her surprise, the young people responded with enthusiasm and genuine curiosity, peppering her with questions about the baby and offering to create a collective mural for the child's room. Their acceptance was a balm for her soul, especially considering the much less positive reactions she had encountered in other circles. Aline's family, with the exception of Donna Teresa, had received the news with barely concealed disappointment. Her parents, upon learning of the pregnancy during a video call to Portugal, expressed concern about her financial situation and emotional stability. When they learned that the father was Caio Muller, their concern turned to suspicion. Be careful, daughter, her mother warned. Rich men have a habit of making promises they don't intend to keep. The words hurt, not because Aline doubted Caio, but because they highlighted the social abyss they still had to overcome. The world was full of stories like the one her mother feared, the rich man who abandons the humble girl after getting what he wants. It was this stereotype that they fought against daily. Caio, in turn, was facing his own battles. After the disastrous lunch at his parents' house, Ricardo had cut off communication with his son for almost a month. It was Elisa who finally made contact, inviting him for tea at the bakery they had been visiting since Caio was a child. "Your father is hurt," she explained, absently stirring her cup. "He's dedicated his entire life to building an empire for you. Understand that in his mind, you're rejecting not just the company, but all the sacrifices he's made." "I'm not rejecting his sacrifice, Mom. I'm choosing not to sacrifice my own life in the same way." Elisa studied him with an expression that Caio couldn't decipher, perhaps a mixture of surprise and a touch of reluctant admiration. "That girl, Aline, is she really that special?" The question caught him off guard. He had never discussed romantic feelings with his mother before. "Yes," he replied simply. "She is." "What about the baby, are you sure?" "Absolutely," he interrupted firmly. "And even if I hadn't, Mom, it wouldn't change anything. I already love this child, and I love Aline. The way we met may have been unconventional, but what we're building together is real and meaningful." Something in Caio's determined tone seemed to finally reach Elisa. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and a hesitant smile appeared on her lips. "Your father will eventually get used to the idea," she said, covering her son's hand with her own. "He's stubborn, but he loves you, and whether he likes it or not, he'll love this grandson too." It was a small but significant step forward. The following week, Ricardo sent his lawyers to begin the process of transferring Caio's share of the family estate, a silent, if grudging, acknowledgement of his son's determination to follow his own path. With the funds released, Caio wasted no time in putting his plans into practice. He rented a large space in Pinheiros, close to Aline's apartment, and began the process of creating the Novo Olhar Foundation, dedicated to offering support to single mothers and families in vulnerable situations. Aline, initially hesitant about mixing her personal and professional life, ended up becoming an informal consultant for the project. Her experiences at the Capão Redondo NGO were invaluable in understanding the real needs of the communities they intended to help. "We can't just come in and impose our vision of what they need," she explained during one of the many evenings. They spent planning together in the living room of her apartment, papers strewn across the coffee table, and leftover Thai food in takeout containers. "We need to listen, understand their reality, build something that really makes sense in their context." Caio absorbed every word, in awe of Aline's intelligence and sensitivity. Each day spent with her confirmed that he had made the right decision, that the path they were taking together, however unconventional, was exactly where they were supposed to be. In the 5th month of pregnancy, during a routine ultrasound, they discovered that they were expecting a girl. The news filled them both with indescribable joy, making the little life that was growing between them even more real. "A girl," Caio repeated, amazed as they returned from the appointment. "Can you imagine? A little Aileen with her intelligent eyes and her stubborn smile. Or a little Caio with his determination and his heart bigger than common sense," Aline teased, laughing. That night, lying in Aline's bed, they discussed names for the first time. After much debate, they agreed on Helena, in honor of Aline's paternal grandmother, a woman who, according to Donna Teresa, had been a pioneer in her time, fighting for the right to study when it was still considered unnecessary for women. Helena Santana Mueller, Caio tested out loud. "It sounds like the name of someone who will change the world." "It'll definitely change ours," Aline replied, guiding his hand to feel a particularly strong kick. The intimacy of these moments contrasts drastically with the media circus that developed when the news of the pregnancy finally leaked to the press. The Muller heir expecting a child with an art teacher from the outskirts was the kind of story the tabloids loved. Speculation about scams, about the future of the company, about Caio's fall dominated the headlines for a few weeks. The first time Aline saw her name in a gossip magazine While waiting in line at the supermarket, it was a shock. "Who is the teacher who won the heart and fortune of Playboy Muller?" read the sensationalist headline, accompanied by a photo of her leaving the building where she worked, clearly taken without her knowledge or consent. She cried when she got home, feeling violated, exposed, reduced to a caricature of a gold digger. Caio, furious, wanted to sue the magazine, but Aline convinced him that this would only fuel the media frenzy. "This will pass," she assured him, with more confidence than she actually felt. "Soon another story will capture their attention." Fact, over time, media interest waned, especially when they failed to extract any drama or scandal from the couple. Caio and Aline continued to live their lives discreetly and focused on their projects, he developing the foundation, she continuing her work at the NGO while preparing for maternity leave. It was during this calmer period that Aline had an idea that would significantly change the course of the Novo Olhar Foundation. What if we included an art therapy program for vulnerable mothers? She suggested over dinner in her apartment, which had gradually become the center of their shared lives. A space where they can process their traumas, fears, and hopes through artistic expression, while developing skills that could even generate extra income. Caio's eyes shone with enthusiasm. "That's brilliant, Aline. We could create a gallery to sell the works produced, with all profits going to the artists." The idea quickly grew into one of the foundation's central pillars. Helene, initially reluctant to take on a formal role in the organization, eventually agreed to direct the art therapy program on the condition that she could continue her work with the Capão Redondo youth, albeit on a reduced scale after Helena's birth. The inauguration of the Novo Olhar Foundation was scheduled for 2 weeks before the expected date of delivery. It was a low-key event, focused not on attracting celebrities or politicians, but on introducing the project to the communities it intended to serve and to other organizations with which it could establish partnerships. To everyone's surprise, especially Caio's, Ricardo and Elisa Muller attended the inauguration. They arrived discreetly, watching from afar as their son presented the foundation's mission and programs with a passion they had never seen when he spoke about real estate developments. Aline was the first to notice them, standing at the back of the room. With her loose dress covering her nearly 9-month belly, she walked up to her unofficial in-laws. "Mr. and Mrs. Muller, what a pleasant surprise," he greeted, extending his hand. "Caius will be happy to see you." Ricardo, still stiff but visibly trying to be cordial, shook his hand briefly. "Miss Santana, you're fine. Huge, actually," she joked, deciding to ease the tension. "But the doctor says everything is perfect with little Helena." "Helena," Elisa repeated, an indefinable emotion crossing her face. "Yes, Helena Santana Muller. We like the strength of the name, the history it carries." Something softened in Elisa's gaze. "It was my mother's name too," the older woman revealed. "Helena." It was a moment of unexpected connection, a bridge across the chasm that separated their realities. Aline smiled, genuinely touched by the meaningful coincidence. "Then she will have much to live up to in her name," he replied softly. When Caius finally spotted them, his speech faltered momentarily. Quickly recovering, he concluded his presentation and walked over to where his family, past and future, awaited him. The meeting was brief, still marked by palpable tension, especially between father and son, but it was a beginning, a small step toward a possible reconciliation. "What you're doing here is admirable," Richard finally admitted, the words clearly difficult for a man accustomed to never giving in. "Different from what I would do, but admirable." Coming from Ricardo Muller, it was practically a declaration of love and approval. Caio nodded, acknowledging his father's effort. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot to me." When his parents left, Caio returned to Aline, who was watching him with a knowing smile. "A small miracle," she commented, lacing her fingers with his. "The first of many, I hope," he replied, placing his free hand on the belly where his daughter was growing, feeling a kick as if in agreement. That night, after all the guests had left, and they were finally alone in the space that represented the beginning of their new path together, Caio knelt before Aline, taking a small velvet box out of his pocket. "I know we promised to take it slow," she said, her voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "And I know our path has been unconventional, but I am certain, Aline Santana, that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Not because we are waiting for Helena, not out of any sense of obligation, but because I love you completely, irrevocably. You have taught me what is truly important in life, shown me a purpose greater than myself. Will you marry me?" Aline looked at the ring, simple, elegant, not ostentatious, exactly how she preferred it, and at the man kneeling in front of her. Not the Mueller heir, not the playboy from the gossip magazines, but Caio, the man who had found the courage to rewrite his own story, who was willing to face the entire world for what he believed in, who looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the universe. "Yes," she replied, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "Yes, I want to marry you." When Caio slid the ring onto her finger and stood up to kiss her, Aline felt that despite all the obstacles, all the differences, all the judgments of the world, they had found something true and precious, a love that did not conform to social expectations, that transcended class barriers and prejudices, that created its own path, its own meaning, a love that, like Helena, was just beginning its journey. Helena Santana Muller was born on a rainy night in May after 12 hours of labor. She came into the world with a strong and healthy cry, 3.2 kilos of pure determination and life, with a dark down covering her little head and Aline's almond-shaped eyes. "She's perfect," Caio whispered, tears streaming freely down his face as he held his daughter for the first time, a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket in the hospital nursery. Aline watched the scene from the hospital bed, exhausted but radiant. The sight of Caio, the former playboy, former real estate heir, now turned devoted father, cradling his daughter with such care and reverence, was the confirmation of everything they had built together in the last few months. "You two are perfect," she replied, holding out her arms to welcome her daughter back. Helena's birth brought with it a wave of change and reconciliation. Donna Teresa was the first to visit the hospital, bringing with her a protective amulet that had belonged to 5 generations of women in the family. Her wise eyes shone with pride when she saw her great-granddaughter, the continuation of a legacy of strong women. "She has the stubborn Santana chin," the matriarch observed, stroking the newborn's face. "This girl is going to be a handful." To everyone's surprise, Ricardo and Elisa Mueller showed up the next day, bringing a discreet but elegant bouquet of flowers and an envelope that, as they would later discover, contained documents establishing a substantial educational fund for their granddaughter. The meeting was marked by an initial tension that gradually dissolved in the face of the miracle of new life. Elisa, in particular, seemed completely transformed as she held Helena for the first time. "She has my family's eyes," he said in a choked voice, "the Mueller eyes." "And determination too, by the way," he grabbed my finger, Ricardo added, allowing himself a rare moment of vulnerability. It was a small step, but a significant one. The wounds were not completely healed. The differences were not fully resolved, but Helena, with her innocence and purity, was creating bridges that had seemed impossible just months before. The first months of motherhood and fatherhood were an emotional roller coaster for Caio and Aline. Sleepless nights, constant worry about every detail of Helena's development, rediscovering themselves in their new roles as parents, all of this tested the strength of their relationship in ways they hadn't anticipated. They decided to postpone the wedding until Helena was a little older, wanting their daughter to consciously participate in the celebration. However, Caio officially moved into Aline's apartment, which, although small by the standards he was used to, truly became a home for him for the first time. The room was transformed into a makeshift nursery, with a mural painted by the NGO's students covering one of the walls, a magical forest landscape with smiling animals and colorful trees. A gift that moved Aline to tears when it was revealed in a small surprise ceremony. The Nova Olha Foundation grew alongside little Helena. The art therapy program, led remotely by Aline during her maternity leave, had become an unexpected success. Women from diverse communities found not only practical support, but a space for expression and healing through art. An exhibition of the works produced in the program, held when Helena turned 6 months old, attracted significant media attention. This time, the kind of attention Caio and Aline were happy to receive. Former Muller heir turns personal tragedy into opportunity for vulnerable women, read one headline, referring to the loss of the inheritance that had actually been a liberating choice for Caio. "They'll never fully understand, will they?" commented Aline, leafing through the magazine that contained the report, while breastfeeding Helena in the rocking chair in the small apartment. "Probably not," Caio agreed, pouring tea for them both. "But it doesn't matter. What matters is the real impact we're having, the lives we're touching." That sentence perfectly summed up the transformation they had undergone. What had once mattered, status, appearances, other people's opinions, now seemed trivial compared to the joy of seeing Helena smile for the first time, of hearing the moving stories of women who had found new hope through the Foundation's programs, of building something genuinely meaningful together. When Helena completed her first year, they celebrated with a simple party in the community garden near their apartment. An unlikely mix of guests attended. Students from the Capão Redondo NGO, some of the mothers assisted by the Foundation, Dona Teresa and her friends from the neighborhood, Daniela and other of Aline's co-workers, Gustavo and some of Caio's loyal friends, and to the surprise of many, Ricardo and Elisa Muller, clearly out of place but visibly trying to fit in. It was during this celebration that Aline realized how much their lives had transformed in the space of just 2 years. From a chance encounter at an extravagant party to this moment, a makeshift but genuine family, built on conscious choices and true love. Helena, dressed in a simple, practical jumpsuit, Aline had insisted on nothing overly princessy, walked hesitantly among the guests, taking a few steps before falling to her feet, stubbornly getting up to try again. Her determination drew smiles and applause from everyone. In a particularly touching moment, the little girl staggered over to Ricardo, who was sitting a little way away, watching the scene with an indecipherable expression. To everyone's shock, especially Caio's, Helena raised her little arms to her grandfather, clearly asking to be held. After a moment's hesitation, Richard leaned forward and picked up his granddaughter, his usually hard eyes softening visibly. Helena immediately grabbed his expensive tie, and instead of flinching, the Muller patriarch laughed, a sound Caius hadn't heard in years. "She has the Muller audacity," Ricardo commented, looking at his son with something that seemed very close to an apology. "And the heart of the Santanas," Caio added, approaching his father with Helena between them like a living bridge, uniting what seemed irreconcilable. That night, after all the guests had left and Helena had finally fallen asleep, Caio found Aline on the apartment's small balcony, gazing at the city lights. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, hugging her from behind. "How life turns," she replied, leaning against him. 2 years ago I was just a lonely teacher with modest dreams. You were an heir trapped in a life you didn't choose. And now we have Helena, and each other. And the Foundation, and a strange but functional family, and a future we're building on our own terms." Caio turned Aline to face him, his intense gaze reflecting the same passion from their first meeting, but now tempered with something deeper, more mature. "I don't regret anything, you know. Not the company, not the money, not the status. I would trade it all 1,000 times for this life we have now. Even with bills to pay and diapers to change," she teased. "Especially with the diapers to change," he laughed. "Every difficult moment, every challenge we face together is more meaningful than all the business dinners and fancy parties I've ever attended." Aline touched his face, still amazed at the transformation she had witnessed in this man. "So when are we going to make this official?" she asked, twirling the engagement ring on her finger. "Helena is already walking. Maybe it's time to plan that wedding we've been putting off. How about next month?" he suggested, surprising her with the quickness of his response. "Something simple in the Foundation garden, just the people who really matter. You, the king of extravagant parties, Want a simple wedding? She teased. The king of extravagant parties is no more, Caio replied with a calm smile. Now I'm just a man who discovered what really matters in life. A month later, under a clear winter sky in São Paulo, Aline walked down a makeshift aisle in the garden of the Fundação Novo Olhar. She wasn't wearing a traditional wedding dress, but an elegant white blazer and pants ensemble that reflected her practical and authentic personality. Helena, in Dona Teresa's arms, clapped excitedly as she watched her mother pass by. Caio waited under an arch of flowers, flanked by Gustavo as godfather and, to everyone's surprise, his father as witness. A symbolic gesture of reconciliation that meant more than any speech could express. The ceremony was brief and deeply personal. They exchanged vows they had written, honest promises that acknowledged the hardships they would face, but also their determination to grow together through them. When I met you at that party, Caius said in his vows, I was looking for a temporary escape from an empty life. What I found was an entirely new path, a purpose, a family. You not only gave me Helena, the greatest gift I have ever received, but you gave me the chance to become the man I always wanted to be, but never knew how. You have shown me that true love is not about fairy tales or perfect endings, Aline replied in her own vows, but about choosing someone every day, through hardships, through differences, through challenges. I choose you today, Caio, not as the prince in a fairy tale, but as the real, imperfect and wonderful man I have come to love deeply. The reception that followed was a genuine celebration of community. The foundation's beneficiaries serving food they had prepared, local musicians providing the soundtrack, artwork from art therapy program participants decorating the space. In one particularly touching moment, Ricardo asked to speak. The silence that followed was charged with anticipation, considering the troubled history between father and son. I spent my life believing that success was measured by wealth, power, and influence, the patriarch began, visibly uncomfortable with his public vulnerability, but determined to move forward. That's how I raised my son, preparing him to inherit an empire, not to build a meaningful life. Now I see that I was wrong. He looked directly at Caio, his eyes wet with unshed tears. You found something more valuable than any fortune I could leave you. You found purpose, true love, the chance to make a real difference in people's lives. I'm proud of the man you've become, son. Prouder than I've ever been of the businessman I tried to mold. There was no dramatic embrace, no instant Hollywood reconciliation. The wounds were too deep, the differences too fundamental for that. But there was a new mutual respect, a recognition that despite their radically different worldviews, the family love remained, transformed but intact. As the night wore on and the celebration continued around them, Caio and Aline found a moment to escape to a quiet corner of the garden. Helena had fallen asleep in the arms of her grandmother Elisa, who seemed determined not to hand her granddaughter over to anyone else. So, Mrs. Santana Muller, are you satisfied with your choice? Asked Caio, pulling Alina closer. More than I could ever say, Mr. Muller Santana, she replied, smiling at the deliberate reversal of their surnames, a small symbol of their equal partnership. They looked up at the starry sky of São Paulo, rarely visible through the pollution, but exceptionally clear that night, as if even the universe conspired to bless their union. You know, when we were kids, my grandmother always said that the real treasure in life is not what you own, but who you love and who loves you back, Aline reflected. I never fully understood it until now. Your grandmother is a wise woman, Caius replied, gently kissing her forehead. And we are incredibly rich, don't you think? Aline nodded, looking around the party where her daughter slept peacefully, where friends and family celebrated their love, where women whose lives had been transformed by the foundation laughed and danced with genuine joy. The richest in the world, she agreed, intertwining her fingers with Caio's, feeling the metal of the newly exchanged rings, symbols not of possession or status, but of a conscious choice to build something meaningful together. And so, under the stars of a São Paulo night, with the distant sound of laughter and music, Caio and Aline sealed their union with a kiss that held the promise of all the challenges and joys that were yet to come. A kiss that spoke not of a fairy tale with a guaranteed happy ending, but of a real story, with ups and downs, difficulties and triumphs, a story that they would continue to write together, one day at a time, with courage, commitment, and true love. A love that, like Helena, like the foundation, like the new path they had chosen, represented not an end but a beginning, the beginning of a journey that, regardless of where it took them, would be worth every step for the simple fact that they were taking it together. The more you comment and share, the more we can bring you stories that touch your heart. Leave your name in the comments and we may include you in one of our next stories with a special greeting just for you.